but tell you, I think, firsthand what hate crime means, and what we've been doing since Sophie's murder. And I think it is quite interesting because it brings up a number of issues, but I'll go through that. So very quickly, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself because it informs the story as we go along. In the late 1980s, early 90s, I did a degree in sociology at Manchester, and from then started doing voluntary work in the youth service, and I'd worked in the youth service really for 20 years. And my last job was working for the Connection Service, which is a government service, working with young offenders, with drug, with alcohol issues. So quite a broad base of equality and diversity training, and was always very interested in that. So we go forward really to 2007. My daughter Sophie, as you see here, age 20, was in a park late at night with her partner, and her partner was attacked, kicked to the ground, and Sophie went to his aid, and while she was protecting him, she was kicked to death and stamped on. She was in hospital for 13 days and obviously died of her injuries. But prior to that, you know, when the police come to tell you that, you know, your daughter and his partner's been attacked, because I worked for Connections, had done a little bit of training on hate crime. And I was just saying the only bit that I remembered or retained in my brain was, you've got to be part of a recognisable group, and a person could say it was a hate crime because they perceived it as such, whether you were the victim or not. So as soon as they came to me and said they've been attacked, my first thing to the police was, are you going to put this as a hate crime? And just let me run back a little, because part of my job was to work in secondary schools, and as part of that to do one-to-ones with young people. And I always ended up, in every school I worked with, I had a small group of alternative young people that I worked with. They either referred themselves to me, or they were referred by teachers, being seen as, because of the way they dressed, they were seen as causing problems. Or from the other aspect, from the young people, they perceived themselves to be bullied by other pupils and also teachers because of the way they were dressed. So obviously I've got this in my head. My daughter, you probably can't see very well here, she had 20 facial piercings, big retainers in her ears, and quite distinctively dressed. She was seen as a goth, but she wasn't particularly a goth. She was quite individual, if you will, more punky goth. But I'd been out on the streets with Sophie and Rob and had seen people's reaction to them. You know, people would recoil or they would call them names, and I'd look at people and I'd think, how dare you? What gives you the right to be able to say this to these young people? You've never even spoken to them. All you're looking at is you know, the persona that they put forward. So obviously, because I've got that background, I'm very vigorous really with the police that yes, you will put it as a hate crime, because actually I know it is. Because nothing would take away that I knew that that's what it was. Anyway, eventually, as you know, the evidence starts to come out and the witnesses start talking about what went on that night. Just before they were hit, one of the perpetrators said, "Let's bang the musher." That gives you your name calling. After the event, two of the perpetrators said to one of the witnesses something about the moshers in the park, etc. So all through the attack, they were called moshers, which is a derogatory term for young people from alternative subcultures. And when we say alternative subcultures, we're talking metalers, punks, goths, moshers, emos, skaters, whatever. We're using it as an umbrella term, really. So we get to, you know, the CPS solicitor, who I have to tell you I have a lot of time for and a lot of respect for, and also the police, actually. I have no arguments with that whatsoever. The problems came when we went to court, but, you know, we won't go into that issue. So we ended up with 5 young men charged with murder, all aged 15 to 17. And what happened was, you know, when Sophie died, we had a big surge, really. We set up a MySpace to enable local bands to talk to each other, because we were going to do a big gig for Sophie, because we couldn't bury her. We'd been told that it would be nearly 5-6 months before we could bury her. So let's have a big gig and let the local people, you know, and her friends get together and celebrate what would have been her 21st. So we set up a MySpace, and what happened was people then started to contact us through this MySpace, sending condolences, saying that they'd been victims of attacks, etc., particularly a lot from America. And then America started sending funds to us and saying to us, you know, do something for Sophie, really. And then we've got, on the other hand, which people probably won't understand, we had the Whitby Goths. There's a massive alternative community up in Whitby, and they started sending condolences as well, because you know, the alternative subcultures are a very tight community, and they see themselves as one big family. And Sophie and Rob obviously were part of that family, and they embraced that. So we had all this going on. The Whitby Goths then set up an online petition to send to Downing Street to say this is a hate crime. And what happened was Gordon Brown and the Labour government were in at that time, and they sent back and said no, it's not a hate crime, because if it is, then it dilutes the hate crime legislation, which is what Nathan and Paul have been saying. So obviously we think it's not going to be, but what we then start to do, we set up in Sophie's name, and we use this as an overarching, and it's stamp out prejudice, hatred and intolerance everywhere. And that's what we started to use, and then people from the alternative subcultures, such as metalers, got behind us, and they started putting gigs on for us, and it raises all the time your profile. And obviously we're coming up to the trial, and what we're trying to do, you know, between us all, is put pressure on to make people, probably in the judicial system, be aware that, you know, there is a lot of anger out there, really, and this has got to be seen as a hate crime, because people from alternative subcultures have put up with such a lot of physical and emotional abuse and violence in previous years. And I'd just like to play you, just very quickly, a song that was done for us by a big metal band. And I can't find it.
On the flash drive.
On the flash drive. Just really to show you the sort of support that we had, and really have continued to have since. But this was just fantastic for us. And I do play this in schools now as well, so they'll listen to it as well. Is it loading, do you think? Yeah. And really this is very important, because it's not just about watching what's going on, it's about listening to the words and seeing how meaningful they are to lots of young people. I just want to show you, there's a bit where it flashes up, which is quite interesting and it's useful to use in schools. So you can see it is quite a powerful song, and as you can imagine, you know, we stood in a field that summer, you know, in the sun blazing with 10,500 people singing that song. It was amazing, you know, and I think the alternative subcultures see Sophie's and Sophie's family, you know, as looking at things in a positive way, because let's be quite honest, you know, there was so much anger out there, it could have turned, you know, a different way. But what we've tried to do is, with setting up the Sophie Lancaster Foundation, is to find something positive out of something so dreadful, really. And we have three main aims and objectives. The first one is to create a lasting legacy to Sophie. The second one is to change the hate crime legislation and to have the term alternative subcultures or alternative lifestyle put into those strands, to allow people from alternative subcultures to have the same protection that other minority groups within those strands have. And thirdly, my main thing is education. You know, I've always worked in education. I think I have a damn good understanding of young people. I understand, you know, where they're coming from, you know, your dirty moshers, that phrase is used because, you know, 14, 15-year-olds think that everybody from alternative subcultures are drug addicts. You know, they either smoke dope or they're smackheads, because they don't have that level of understanding, they don't have that level of tolerance. So you know, that was one of the big things, that we were going to set up educational workshops and take those into schools and challenge young people's perceptions, you know, and particularly talk to them about tolerance. Anyway, Sophie's, we came up to the trial and we held a silent vigil outside the court, you know, along with people from alternative subcultures. They came from all parts of the country. But what was most interesting during the trial, 2 of them were found guilty of murder and 3 were found guilty of Section 18's on rob. But we come up to the sentencing, and bear in mind, we have no idea that Judge Russell was going to say during the sentencing, this is a hate crime equal to all others. I am quite convinced these young people were attacked simply because they dressed differently to yourselves. And that, for me personally, actually, never mind the campaign or anything else, was massive, because I knew that they would get stiffer sentences. I'm sorry about that, but that's the reality. But it was massive for everybody, really, in the alternative subcultures. And then what happened was, just during the trial, we got an email from a guy saying, I need to speak to you, I'm going to set up a makeup company. And we were busy during the trial, so we sent the email back and I can't be bothered. Then he sent back, no, I need to speak to you. So we just said, oh, just send us some stuff. Anyway, they sent us this big box, and I should have brought some to show you. And they were setting up a company called Ilamaska that's in Germany, in Dublin now, in New York, in Australia, throughout, it's worldwide, Dubai. And what they wanted to do was link our little charity with themselves, with the makeup company. So we decided that, oh, go on then, we'll do that. And so that's what we've been doing really from day one. And Illamasqua, the guy who runs it is a big goth in many different ways. He's, you know, one of the top goth guys, really. And he's put his money where his mouth is, and he's really backed us all the way. So much so that he's now started the charity out in Australia, and I'll be going out there to do some work in Australia and in New York. So he's definitely done what he set out to do. And I suppose what I'm here for today is to say to people, you know, when you're thinking about hate crime, and we all know about, you know, racism, about, you know, now coming on board disability, but what I'm really trying to say to you is, think outside the box. I honestly believe it's not just, you know, I know that the hate crime legislation, you know, for the last 10 years, but we're now in a different period, we're in a different time. Let's bring it up to date, and let's include other sections of people. And I'm not just talking young people. And I know one of the arguments against alternative subcultures is, well, there's no history. Well, actually, yeah, there is. Because if you listen to Vivienne Westwood's son, when he talks about walking down the street with his mum and being spat at, you know, there is a history there. And I think what people need to do about alternative subcultures, I know I've no research, but that is starting to come on board. We've just had John Garland at the University of Leicester, who's done a paper. We've got these guys on this side, and they're looking at using our Facebook, which we've got 40,000 people on there, you know, to do some further research. We've also, in between all this period, we have done our educational work groups. Paul and Nathan have seen them. Very highly professional, done by an international training company in Huddersfield, and we've actually been into schools with them, and you know, it's amazing. And the other week I went to an inner city school in Manchester and did an assembly for our year 8s. Well, that were mad. Put Sophie's picture up, and one of them went, "Oi, that's a mosher, that is." Well, obviously, great, couldn't be any better, you know. So I challenged him on that one, and that was quite interesting. And we've had lots of interest in the group works. Yesterday we had an aviation college contact us. They want to do some work with us. Trinity College in Dublin, they've contacted us. Will you come across? So we're getting there, I think. But I have to say, as part of our group works, we've got a very short DVD which I would like you to watch. It's been very cleverly done. It's very subtle. It is using artistic license. But you'll see how powerful it is. And imagine how powerful it is when you use this in school. Can I turn the lights off? Down? It's just, it's a bit more atmospheric. Can I turn it up? Right, that short DVD is used throughout the country. It was shown in Macedonia the other day. And it serves its purpose. And we are going to bring another film out actually this year. We'll bring that out on August the 11th, which will be the 4th anniversary of the attack. And run a programme till the 24th of August, till she died. I think, in fairness, I think we're very innovative. You know, we've massive Facebook, we Twitter, we blog, we do everything, and hopefully we will succeed with your help. Any questions?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I
So
don't
hard
know.
to speak to someone.
Sylvia, would you prefer the addition of subcultures to the kind of list of things that are protected, or a different definition of hate crime that didn't specify any particular groups as protected but could be applied in kind of the way that Anthony Russell did apply it in the court when he said,
Yes.
this is a hate, it looks like a hate crime, it smells like a hate crime, it's a hate crime,
Yeah.
rather than there being a list of people who are protected.
I think that might be, let's be honest, I'm not fussed either way, as long as we get it under there. But in reality, Mark, that would be, I think, a better option is to have the wider definition.
Yeah, I mean, so we've seen from Kieran's sort of overview at the beginning that I suspect that, so it looks very different the way that the legislation is constructed in different countries, and I suspect it has something to do with different histories, but also different
Yes.
traditions a bit.
Yeah.
In some countries you need these long lists because of the legal system, the way the legal system is set up. In some countries you may not. Right?
Yeah.
But in any case, it would be, I would consider this quite easily to say that, so if you have a law or a statute that's constructed by saying, well, if you have this element of whatever we call it, which is targeting something, and then you have an enumeration, so you say it has to do with your sex, your sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, ability, disability, whatever it is. And it's quite easy to add, nationality, and then you can just add something like cultural belonging, or, it's almost a part of the ethnicity concept, really. Yeah? You could construct the ethnicity concept to include subcultural membership, although it's maybe not so common. But you could add something about, or lifestyle. Simple as that.
Yeah.
You don't need to talk about alternative lifestyles, really. So you could have protection also against sort of majority lifestyles. So if someone is attacked because it's engaging in sort of very common majority lifestyle, that would be an example of a hate crime as well. Just as you said, the way you constructed it in the UK, it goes both ways. That would be quite easy. But I wanted to ask you, when you've been around sort of campaigning a bit for this, have you encountered any sort of opposition or counter-argument to what you want to have?
No.
You haven't?
No.
Okay.
The only issue, and I do understand that, it comes from UK government where they're talking about the dilution of hate crime legislation, and I understand what they're saying.
Right.
I'm not a barrister, and I know there are very clever barristers out there, and actually they can write, whether it be lifestyle, whether it be culture, whatever it be,
Right.
I'm sure that they can do that, so that you're not allowing groups such as football hooligans in there, which is their argument. Bigger brains than I can sort that bit out.
Okay.
Just saying what we're talking about, unfortunately, bigger brains don't include me, but we're limited as to what we can say in terms of government stance on this, because there's been a green paper out and
Yeah.
Sylvia's submitted views into that. And me and my colleagues are responsible for pulling all that together for ministers to make soon. One of the challenges like sort of just alluded to, is the view that people and Parliament, I guess, wouldn't want this to be applicable to paedophiles or neo-Nazis and things like that. So having a way of actually delivering that in a way that's acceptable to Parliament is going to be, I guess, the biggest challenge. But none of that takes away the policy issues that says that section 143 is it that allows the courts to calculate the seriousness, which is what happened in Sophie's murder. That the court that have got the ability to calculate the seriousness of an offence, and the targeting of somebody because they're vulnerable, because they're part of a minority group is the option of that. It's about the clarity, but none of that takes away the policy side of it, the implications and the issues that Sylvia tells us so clearly, which are issues for Sylvia and for the family and for people who would identify in the same way, or we've got family members who would identify in the same way, who fear that same risk, demand the same protection, the same issues of concern and of security. So I think for us, policy and legislation don't necessarily have to go together. They can be one without the other, or one separate to the other. And that's, I guess, from the police perspective, what the key message for us is. And then government's obviously got a big decision to make.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand that. I know that judges can, obviously in Judge Russell's case, he did use his discretion. But my argument is that not everybody's discretion is the same. And we've had, only the other day, somebody had gone to the police station, even as basic as this, and you know, get away sort of thing, we don't want your kind in here. And that's the truth, and that's the reality that these sort of people face on a daily basis, and it's not right.
I want to add that, because, I mean, that the judge can use his discretion. That's true in the UK.
Yeah.
It's not true in Sweden, because we don't have the common law tradition. So it's different there. So if you look at it from European perspective, which is this project's perspective, you think about, well, how could we sort of work it out to protect the things that this sort of laws are supposed to protect, and still make it work in different countries with very different sort of setups in the criminal legal system. And I mean, that point you made was very good. But that also sort of takes that you have a certain tradition within policing.
Yeah.
For instance,
which doesn't exist.
That sort of thought, right? Which I'm not sure is also the case, which I'm not sure is actually in place in every European country. Because there are different traditions there also.
I mean, I think one thing that helps us is the relationship between the police and the community in the UK is very different, because we're an unarmed force, and for those, and we all know that we turn up in a country with a paramilitary style of policing, and it immediately feels less approachable, doesn't it? So there is that issue. And I think one of the other reasons why criminal justice agencies take it so seriously in the UK is because we were kicked so hard from the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. The findings were so fundamentally challenging that almost the driver for our change was not our intent, it was the unacceptability to the community of the service they were getting, and so it comes around both ways, doesn't it?
And I just have to say, Romania, we've actually helped Romania set up their campaign, which is called the Black Cat Campaign. And you can, I'll have a look on your internet there, and we've got very close links with them, because Romania have have come out and said we've got a big problem, since the downfall of communism, and people are starting to be who they want to be, and they're finding lots of intolerance in Romania. So we have done work internationally as well.
I was just looking on Sylvia's Facebook page, and yesterday she made a little comment about the fact she was coming here to talk to us. And one of the comments says, I have to admit that I personally don't have any serious issues for being alternative, but I have suffered lots of little issues.
There you go.
And the word didn't say issues, but my screen's just frozen, but it said something like that. However, all these little things do add up to discrimination, and I think it's quite interesting and because it reflects exactly what we've been saying there about antisocial behaviour and the culmination. And the reason I wanted to raise that is that it's 5:45. I've been a very bad chairman and made it very long, but I think we enjoyed the conversation, so it was good. But I wanted to try and give just a voice to another victim who is never moved. Because we have also had some, not a lot, but some commentary on the Twitters, as we know, from people who aren't in the, who admittedly, for the most part, from members of my research team who are on maternity leave and therefore weren't allowed to travel with me. But still, we have also been retweeted by some external people. So the discussion has begun to take place outside of this room, which is part of the point of the conference, and also the reason that we've been recording everything so that we can broadcast all of these things. Tomorrow, hopefully we will have MEPs joining us. You really can't tell until they decide to turn up or not whether they are going to turn up or not. We're just over the road from Parliament. It's not very far from to cross the street. We'll cross our fingers. We do have an alternative plan if we get all cancellations, so don't think you can just nip off early if the MEPs don't turn up. The plan is to go to the Table de Louise by taxi, and I think if we all rendezvous in the foyer at 7 o'clock, I will then have the hotel summoned the correct number. And I do apologise, I've had at least 2 dirty looks so they make the time that I'm leaving people for getting ready. But you know, I'm a quick changer myself. But thank you all. Can we have a final round of applause for more or less everybody? Smart casual.